Hey, what's up, guys? It's Asher. I am sitting here. It's late at night. I've got my microphone propped up on top of my copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. It's the only book tall enough to get the microphone about even with my face. And I just watched a video from one of these groups and league that they try to sell you their coaching and their guides. And their guides are made by pros or challengers. I'm not going to say exactly who it is, but they put out these videos, and oftentimes what they say is at least inaccurate. And they say, our challenger analysts say this, and I don't know, maybe they do, but it often feels like the analysis is like just out of this world wrong. Maybe it's like analysis for pros. If that's the case, that's fine. But they don't say that. They say it's, it's just for the average guy who wants to climb, pay money to us, get our coaching, and climb. But their advice is just not almost always, but often so weird and kind of wrong. And so this is what they wrote about Rengar and Axiom Arc. So I wrote down what they wrote in my in my address bar just so I can have it right here. And they wrote, if you guys watched our recent tier list, we theorized that Rengar would perform extremely well with an Axiom Arc rush, and that's exactly what's played out. Axiom is outperforming every mythic for Rengar. So here we are. First item for Rengar right here. Duskblade, about 46%. Yomu's, 50.4%. Eclipse, 47. Axiom Arc, 45. So it's the worst first item rush for him. All right, so we go to the second item. It's under 50% for a second item, which is terrible for a second item. Now, if you look at Rengar's items, he does not have a lot of good second items. He's just not a good champ right now. It's only when you get to a third item where Axiom Arc is sort of, in any way, kind of good on Rengar. It's equally good as several other choices, but at least it's not a troll pick. The problem is that Axiom Arc is kind of a troll pick, and for how much people are complaining about it on Reddit and other, league discussion places, it's nowhere near the power that people complain about. It's just frustrating to play against. But I get annoyed at people saying, "Oh, this item needs to be nerfed." Like, what would it just refunded 25% of your current cooldown rather than your absolute cooldown? If they did that, Axiom Arc would be one of the worst items in the game. It already is statistically one of the worst items in the game. I'll show you why in a second. So we've looked at Rengar. By the way, you can go to Rengar top, and what they said about that is also true. It's actually worse for Rengar top, so it's not good in either Rengar. Here's Nocturne, another one people are complaining about. People are rushing this. This is the most bought first item. It's a 48% win rate. There are better first items to buy on Nocturne. Stridebreaker is so much better. 52%. Buy Stridebreaker. If you want lethality, buy Eclipse. You don't want lethality, but if you want it, buy Eclipse. Don't buy Axiom Arc. As a second item, it's the most bought item. That means that the people who aren't buying it first are buying it second. As a second item, it's 51.8. That's really bad for a completed second item. Look at Sterix. Sterix, 54%. Sterix is the better buy. Collector is the better buy. Collector is a terrible item. Black Cleaver is a better buy. But the problem is that people don't think about how much power is my champion getting out of my ult, and what does the ult do? Nocturne's ult and Rengar's ult both get them into fights, but they don't do a lot of damage. They just let them arrive. They're terrible picks for Axiom Arc. People like Qiyana have a much more impactful ult. She doesn't really do well with it, but at least it makes a little more sense. So I'm going to ask you right now, close your eyes and think about a champion who's a jungler who you wouldn't expect to do well with the Axiom Arc, but would be doing better than both Nocturne and Rengar. And if you're looking at my tabs, you're cheating. But just think about it right now. Okay. So here's Karthus Jungle. And as a second item buy, Axiom Arc has a 53% win rate. Not a lot of people are buying it. As a third item buy, it has a 59.6% win rate. Once again, not many people are buying it. 8 people have bought it as the first item. That's incredibly dumb. But the point is that Karthus' ult is so impactful and also applies to everyone on the team that even though it gives you nothing you want on Karthus other than ability haste, it's still a better buy statistically than Nocturne or Rengar. Here's the thing. Axiom Arc is not really a good item, except on a few characters. And you have to think about why their ults are good. So we're going to Ezreal. Okay, Ezreal as a third item. Look at this. 61% win rate on Axiom Arc. That's way better than Serilda's. It's as good as Ravenous Hydra, that's fine. But this is a really good third buy. You don't want to buy it second. You want to buy it third. Okay. We're going to go on here. League of Items. What do we have here? Okay. So here we have Axiom Arc at 53.1% win rate. And you're like, isn't that a pretty good win rate? It's not. No, it's not for an item that's bought second or third. If you look amongst all the items that Axiom Arc is amongst, it's mostly amongst mythics. And mythics have lower win rates because almost everyone completes a mythic. So they're going to be closer to 50% win rate. So if you scroll down here, your worst mythics are down here: Duskblade, Prowler's Claw, Night Harvester, Gore Drinker, Eclipse, Locket. Interestingly, your Locket's fallen this far. These are your worst mythics. And like the only item way down here that's not a mythic is Umbral Glaive, which is also bought first by a small amount of champions, but it's bought so little that the stats are pretty irrelevant. What you want for an item is you want it somewhere up in here, around the 55% rate with good usage. If you look at Black Cleaver, bought in a quarter of games, 55% win rate. Thornmail, bought in 44% of the game, 55%. Now, these items will always be higher because winning teams complete items. So if you're winning and you've completed a second item and the person you're playing against has just made a BF sword, then they don't get an item counted for their loss. If they're going to build that BF sword into a Bloodthirster or whatever, an Infinity Edge, that Infinity Edge or Bloodthirster that was intended to be built doesn't show up as a loss because they lost the game before they completed it. So every item that's not a mythic is going to have a higher win ratio. And if you look up here, this is where the really good items are. And the really busted ones, like I talked about in my video: Demonic Embrace, Cosmic Drive, Sterix. These are built in a lot of games. 64%, 20%, 36%. This should rise, by the way, Cosmic Drive and Demonic Embrace. But these have really high win rates. And then if you look all the way at the top, you get niche items and support items. These are built very rarely. You'll see their percents are almost all below 20%. And that's because supports can't afford second items. Like if you have two items as a support, you're probably winning. Lots of supports end the game with an item and a half, and so it never gets counted. So support items get inflated. That's why they also have lower win percent ratios. Things like Rabadon's Death Cap and Gargoyles, well, not Gargoyles, so played. Rabadon's Death Cap and Guardian Angel are bought by people who are like trying to win more and are usually ahead. So they have good numbers, even though they're already at like 37% and 32%. They're bought by snowballing people. So when you have the Axiom Arc all the way down here, this is bad. Okay. So let's try to think of things where Axiom Arc would be good. You want to think of champions that can benefit from ability haste, from damage, and from lethality. And think outside the box here a little bit. Doesn't have to be a typical lethality champion. And don't look ahead. Or do. Okay. They have to have powerful ults. And ults that like gate them. So when Riot designs this champion, they're like, wow, a lot of their power is in the ult. So we'll give them a long cooldown, or it has, usually it's long cooldowns. And that's why Karthus, for instance, does well, even though he has nothing on it. But if you think about Tryndamere, he's got an amazingly powerful ult. And if you look at his win rate, 61% is a second item. Super high. People aren't really building it that much. They probably should. Same thing as a third item. Expect this to climb. This is sort of like the secret tech. Xayah. I mean, she does the lethality build now. Eclipse is her most common build. Look at this as a second win item. 57.8%. Better than anything else you can build. It's still, once again, people really mana so much more. But it's good as a third item. I would probably just go straight to Axiom Arc as a second item. Skip the mana or build it third. And then Senna, I talked about on my video. I mentioned that she has a good Axiom Arc start, and that has fallen down. Like there was small data on that. More people have done it. It's at 49%. So it's not terrible, but it's no longer like a great rush. But if you look at it as a second item, look at this, 57%. on a decent amount of builds, that is strong. So Senna is another person who has a powerful ult, gated by a long cooldown. Axiom Arc really makes sense. Anivia, I just brought up here because I was going to show you guys. I talked about this in my last video. Look at this. Crown of the Shattered Queen, now climbing even more, but holding on to a 57% win rate. This item is so busted on Anivia. That 57% win rate for a first item should not happen. If you have a friend who's a Anivia main, if you want to play Anivia, buy this item first. It is so broken. The other thing I talked about Singed and how he can buy Demonic Embrace first. Let's check that out. And look at this. It's climbing up on Singed, 55.8, almost 56% win ratio on Singed. Also, super high, super broken. Should not be this high. Abuse it while you can. Okay, so the last thing I have here is this LOL ARAM tier list. This is to show, although Axiom Arc is really, really getting way too much coverage and being mentioned way too much as a powerful thing, in ARAM, it is so broken. And if you look at the number of champs who have climbed up to the top 10 or 15, if you pay attention to ARAM win rates at all, this is not how it should be. You got Jinx, you got Ashe, you got Camille, you got Vayne, you got Senna, Sivir. Set's actually almost always up here. Obviously, Sona, Seraphine, and Ziggs are almost always up here. But this list is now dominated by people who can build Axiom Arc and use the stats and have strong ults. I played Jhin earlier today in ARAM. I built it first. It was so stupid. I would ult, I would hit 4 people, my team would kill 3 of them. Like my ult's back up. I just ult again. It is legitimately a super dumb item on ARAM. They probably should change it to do 25% of current cooldown on ARAM, but in the game, Axiom Arc is being really overvalued on the wrong champions and undervalued like we're seeing with these Ezreal, with the Tryndamere, with the Xayah, where it's really strong and people are not building it yet. People have not figured this out. In a week or two, I think people will figure out what it's strong on, but expect to see lots of posts on Reddit about how dumb it is, how unfair it is on the wrong champions. Nocturne ulting 2 times in a fight is not broken. He uses ults to engage. If he ults in the second time, he's getting the 5th person. He's already won the fight. Axiom Arc is being way overvalued on the wrong champions, and there are a lot of champions it's really good on who are not being valued properly at all. Thanks for listening.